Welcome to our workshop and welcome to my first video of my new video series called Quick Tips, a short video series where I show you cool tips and tricks from my build videos. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to make a perfect circle on the bandsaw. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's get started. So for a few of my last projects, I whipped up these super simple circle cutting jigs that I used to cut the circle for this side table, as well as the circle for the mold for this Jessamine tabletop. Now for both of those videos, I just made these one-time use type of jigs out of a scrap piece of MDF. In today's video, I'm going to go in a little bit more detail about how the jig works, and I'm also going to make a little bit nicer one. And the one we're going to make today is also going to be adjustable for a bunch of different sized circles. So let's start building this thing. Alright, so I've got a piece of melamine left over from the mold I made for the tabletop, and this is going to be perfect for the circle cutting jig. Because it has a nice and smooth surface that whatever we're cutting a circle out of can slide on. Now you definitely don't need to use melamine for this, you can use whatever you want as long as it's relatively flat and smooth. Like MDF will work great. Alright, so here's how this super simple jig is going to work. We're going to mark one location on the board here into which we're going to cut with the bandsaw, and then to the right of that location we're going to mark up a bunch of points that are going to represent the center of a bunch of different sized circles. In those locations I'm going to drill some holes to insert one of these pins. These are just the kind of pins that you stick on the inside of your cabinet to put the shelves up on. And then one side of this pin is going to go into the hole in here. The other one is going to go into a small hole you have to drill in the center of the board that you're cutting a circle out of. They're both going to go together, spin them around, and you can cut out a circle. And you know what? Drilling the holes for these pins is actually optional. In the last few I made, I just used the nail that I hammered into the jig and then cut the head off. And then into the board, I just hammered in the nail and then pulled that back out. Which works great if you're just doing it once, but I want to make a jig for many projects to come. So let's start by marking off where we're going to cut in with our bandsaw blade. Now this really doesn't matter, but I like to use a nice round number, so I'm going to use 10 centimeters. And using a square, I'm going to mark a line. Now here's one of the things I'm going to do to make my life easier in the long run. I'm going to screw on this strip of plywood to the back side here, and I'll make sure to align it to the back edge. So now that when I on the bandsaw go and cut in along this line, I'll have a stop block that will stop in the same position every time. And if you don't want to do this, you can do what I've done previously, and that is to clamp a piece of wood of the same thickness to the front here. But then you would have to do that every time, and now I don't have to do that anymore. Now the next step is to get our fence set so that we can cut along the line. And if you don't have a fence on your bandsaw, you can just clamp a piece of wood to the table and make sure that it's square to the front. You'll only have to do it once. And now we cut along that line until the block in the back here stops on the front edge. Alright, so now that we've done that, we know exactly where the bandsaw blade is going to end up. So now we can start marking the locations for the holes that we're going to drill. Really quickly on the size of this thing though. I chose the size of this board to be about 60 by 40. I made the board roughly twice as deep as the distance from the front of the table to where the saw blade hits, and the width of the board obviously decides how big of a circle you can cut. This one now has about 45 centimeters from the blade to right about here, which means that I can cut a circle 90 centimeters big. And that's the really cool thing about these jigs, is that you can cut really big circles on really small bandsaws. The only thing you need to do is somehow support all the material out here. Alright, over here at the drill press, I've marked a line from where the bandsaw blade ended up, and then across the board, and I marked every 2 centimeter increment, so that I now can drill holes on all of those marked locations. And the last step is going to be to make use of this slot that I have in my table here. Most bandsaws have this. I've just cut a strip of plywood that perfectly fits inside of here, which I now intend on gluing onto the back side of my jig so that it has a nice guide when cutting into the board initially, as well as that nice stop block in the back to hold everything nice and securely in place. So I'm just going to line this up and make sure that it's sticking out a little bit. Add a bunch of super glue, some activator to the bottom side. Make sure everything is aligned. Drop it down and hope for the best, I guess. And haha! And you know what? This whole jig with all its extra functions is actually done. So let's try it out. I've just got a piece of scrap wood here that I marked the center of and then drilled a hole that matches the pin I'm using. And now I can insert that pin into the hole that will give me the right diameter circle. Oh, and by the way, I ended up marking all the holes with the measurement for the diameter of the circle I'm going to cut, just to make it a little bit easier for myself. So I want this board to have a diameter of 32 centimeters. Insert the pin, insert the board onto the pin, and start cutting. just start by cutting straight in. Everything is locked in place. And just as easy as that, you have a perfect circle cut on the bandsaw. Oh, and by the way, a good reason to have the board riding in the slot instead of using the side fence is that now the corners of the board that you start with now can stick out over the edge here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my version of a super simple jig that you can make to cut perfect circles on a bandsaw. So I really hope you liked this video. If you did, please let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you have any requests for future videos like this, maybe there's something you see me do in one of my build videos that you want me to explain in a bit more detail, please let me know in the comments right below that like button. As for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye! I'm actually gonna cut some more circles.